Hello, so today we're going to be going over the best comps for patch 15.8. This is going to be me going over some of the comps that I think are good recommendations for climbing or doing well in this basically last patch of set 15. If you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe. Normally I'm doing daily TFT guides, but I also do some reactionary content, some tier lists, but there's also a lot of guides there with some playlists for you if you want to get the most out of your set 15 experience. Also, I say this is almost the last patch of the set, so as soon as set 16 comes out, you know, I'm going to be going through all of that, PBE and onwards, so stay tuned and stay excited for that. But anyways, just as a brief overview, I usually talk about reroll comps, 4 cost comps, and in some cases 5 cost comps, depending on what the current landscape of the game is. Just as a quick overview, rerolls, obviously if you have a good spot for them, are really strong because there's a lot of great reroll units that have great options with a lot of the power-ups in the game, so that's a great thing that you can go for. But the 5 costs are still extremely strong. That's just the way the set kind of played out. So there's a little bit of a gap in between like having a reroll spot where you're rolling really early to find your units and then maybe making it towards these juicy 5 costs that are really strong. Because of that, and especially because of some of the patches that have nerfed some of the units here and there, a 4 cost comps are also going to be quite popular just because you may not cap as high as a 5 cost board, but you can roll a little bit earlier, save a lot of HP, and punish a lot of the players that are trying to like skip a step going to level 9, or reroller players that can miss. So it really comes down to your lobby, which comp you will have the most success with, and a lot of it is trying to match the tempo of your lobby on when you're rolling and why you're rolling your gold. Anyways, let's get through to the comps. We're going to start with reroll. So Katarina got nerfed actually, so this comp is a little bit weaker from last time, but it's still one of the better reroll comps to play around. Katarina has great itemizations and great fruits that work really well because she has great synergies and everything kind of flows very nicely with itself. Age-old comp, I'm sure you guys have seen it many times if you watched any of my content before. I'll just do a brief overview. Usually play it with 7 Battle Academia. It just gives everybody what they want most. Katarina, she basically blinks and does AP damage and spins around, so she can scam backlines. That's part of why she's so strong, because if you just get somebody caught sleeping or they don't position for you, you can find yourself in a spot where the Katarina just instantly wins the fight no matter how strong the enemy's board is. When you're building Katarina, Hand of Justice is really good, or Hodge. It gives mana gen, it gives crit chance. She's an executioner, so she's gonna have her abilities critting already, so this increases those chances to make it more likely that she's gonna get those crits off. Because she dives the backline, I personally think Edge of Night is pretty good on her, just to make sure that you get a second lease at life. And then last item, very flexible. You can go for more damage, or you can go for something like Nashor's Tooth, because obviously with Katarina, if she can cast, she spins, she jumps around. That's like the main aspect of her kit, excuse me. So something like Nashor's Tooth works really well with her as well. In terms of power-ups, you usually want the scaling power-ups. So especially now, because she got nerfed, the scaling power-ups are going to feel more essential in my opinion. So you really don't want to be trying to angle Katarina from like a bad spot. You really want to be playing it from a spot where you start with the Katarina, start with a good scaling fruit in my opinion. So stuff like over 9,000, right? Over 9,000 is really strong because if you could roll mana gen, it makes her absolutely broken. This is extremely important on her. But a lot of the other stats are also good because she's a melee frontline unit. So she can even make use of some of the tanky stats and just giving her some survivability. But the more preferred one, like, if you high roll with over 9,000, it's obviously going to be really good on her. But you can also low roll with over 9,000. Something that's a little bit easier is Max Arcana, or Max Arcana, depending how you say it, right? Max Arcana basically gives you ability power, and it stacks that ability power. Because you were playing an executioner unit, getting base AP is going to make it really strong because you're going to multiply that by your crit strike, right? When you get your crit off, and playing executioner makes that really good. So it's a little bit less low roll is what I'm trying to say. So this is a great option if you don't want to roll over 9,000 and hope that you hit mana gen and some of the other stats. This one is just consistently really good. So those are the 2 fruits you're primarily trying to hit on her. There's also other stuff like Not Done Yet. This is another thing that's kind of like a scaling fruit, but basically you just get a bunch of Omnivamp and Damage Amp. Damage Amp is also good because similar to like her kit, right? You can give her base AP, you can change her build a little bit, and then by giving her the damage amp, that multiplies the same way crit would, so now you're multiplying with AP from your items, damage amp, and crit chance. So all of those decent options, but like I said, you're really looking for one of those fruits now. There's not much flexibility, just because of the nerfs to her in my opinion, so you gotta be a little bit more careful in those Katarina spots. Next, I want to talk about some Malzahar. So Malzahar, very strong. This comp has been like in and out of the game, but there's many different variations. I'm going to talk about this one, which is like the average Malzahar case. This is playing 6 heavyweight. Heavyweight fits in really nicely, but basically you want to stall out for Malzahar to spread his infection to everybody, because then they just take a bunch of damage, and then if the units die, it starts to stack, so then all the units just get deleted and the board kind of falls apart. Heavyweight allows you to stall, so you really want to play that really strong vertical front line, but you can also make use of Darius. Darius is great. You can build him with like different types of belt items, you know, drain tanky kind of items like a Bloodthirster or a what's it called, Bloodthirster with the Titans. In reality, I like to build them more towards crit. I just want to take like a lot of the base AD, excuse me, that you would get from 6 heavyweight. I want to convert that into like a really strong hit, because Darius will just chew through some frontline units, and as soon as you start killing units, Malzahar now has less units to put his infection on, and then it kind of just stockpiles and those units take an insane amount of damage, which is really potent. In terms of power-ups, usually with Malzahar, you're going for Noxious Trap. This gives you Burn, Wound, Shred, and Sunder, so you don't have to worry about making those items. It allows you to build more towards damage items, which is what I'm showing here, right? When we have our items on Malzahar, blue buff just gets him to cast. Usually you can't fit in Prodigy until a little bit later. Make your spells crit, and then also give yourself some base AP with like Rabadons. Items are flexible. You can also build like pretty much any other items, but usually you want like a mana gen and spell crit and something like that. It's going to work out pretty well. But either way, you can focus on making really good damage items, and then ideally, if you have extra items, you can put some tank items on Poppy. And the reason you can do that is because you roll Noxious Trap on the Malzahar. Of course, you can also go Max Arcana or Max Arcana. Similarly, on Malzahar, if you get him early and you can scale him up, it just has infinite AP. That's going to work out really well. Now, there is one other thing that's really, really important on this current patch, and that is the other variations of Malzahar. These ones are straight fucking broken, right? Like, when I say broken, these are like you click it all the time type of broken. What is this? I actually made a video on it, but I'm gonna amend some of the things I talked about in the video, so I'm gonna update you guys a little bit. But basically, this is augment called Double Trouble, right? Double Trouble, when you field 2 copies of a champion, they both gain attack damage, ability power, armor, and magic resist. Basically, this 33 that you get on all these stats is a lot. It might not seem like a lot at first. You might be like, you know, like, do I really want these stats? Like, do I have a unit that uses all the stats? It's like, no, it doesn't matter if you're using all the stats or not. This is an absurd amount of stats. So a lot of times, you're looking for boards where you don't have to play deep synergies, where you can play duplicate copies of units, where things work out really well. So Double Trouble, Malzahar became something really, really popular in recent history. So much so that, like, you know, I think under the radar, there was actually Rammus buffs that went through on the last patch, which made this comp, which was already broken last patch, even more broken this patch, which, you know, is unfortunate, but maybe they'll be-patch it, who knows. Either way, when you play Double Trouble, if you 3-star a unit, you get a second copy that's 2-star. Malzahar, you like to play 2 copies of him anyways. One of the things in the past with Malzahar was that you would play him with a fruit called Shadow Clone. They removed that because it was so broken. Because when he's spreading his infection, the duplicate copy of the Malzahar also can spread that infection. So the whole effect that I talked about, where you want to get everybody with an infection, have them die, and have the thing stack on different units so it deletes the whole board. If you have 2 Malzahar, it works better because the other Malzahar counts towards like whether units are infected or not. So playing 2 Malzahars is extremely strong, and that's a lot of where this comp kind of came together. The problem was, how could we have a strong enough front line to support the 2 Malzahars in the back line if I'm rerolling Malzahar? Enter Rammus, which got a lot of buffs over the course of many patches, and specifically with Double Trouble, this board works particularly well because the Rammus gets so many stats that he can just like exist as a solo frontline unit that's impossible to kill. Plus the buffs on the last patch makes it even worse. So obviously you build full damage to full tank towards this Rammus, and then obviously the Malzahar. I even put some flexibility here. You can even go for like a full crit in these types of builds because you're gonna have a lot of base stats anyways, right, from Double Trouble. So you can go for like Nashor's JG instead of like blue buff JG. Your items are very flexible. You can just build other items as well, like Giant Slayer, Strikers, right? You have lots and lots of options. Same thing applies with the fruits. You might just want to tank fruit on the Rammus. Before, I made the video, actually. So if you want to see more about this comp, I think I made it like a day or 2 ago, actually. Yeah, I made it 1 day ago, Double Trouble Malzahar, and I went through a full deep dive, 20 minutes, just explaining every nuance about it. When they buffed Rammus, for some reason, So this used to be one variation. You would basically just play double Cassante and Nico. Originally, this one wasn't performing very well in like high level lobbies, so I didn't consider it to be very strong. And I consider in the video I mentioned that you should probably just play the Darius variation, because Darius makes great use of all the double trouble stats, armor, MR, and he has AP and AD scaling on his ability, so he just uses all the double trouble stats. And like I said with Malzahar, when we're talking about 6 heavyweight Malzahar, the Darius plays a key role in this board, because killing the units early allows the Malzahar to spread the infection a little bit easier, and allows like the whole stockpiling and House of Cards effect collapsing to happen earlier. So when I looked at this, I was like, yeah, it's obviously that you play Darius with this because you need the extra damage, because Malzahar might not be able to might be able to suffice on his own. This variation now, it's still broken, but it's actually performing a lot worse than this variation, which is like the opposite of what I said in the original video. So I'm here just to correct my mistake, say, my bad, I don't know, something came up. When they buffed Rammus, apparently you don't need the extra damage from Darius. Malzahar does enough damage on his own. So as of right now, this one's performing significantly better, but it also just might be high roll because you need to find 2 Cassantes, right? So like if I look at stats and I look at like board states and I look at everything else, I still think this one's going to be more consistent in terms of like playing around it. But I think this one's going to be higher cap now, because it actually does seem to perform better in like the highest cap. But like I said, it's very high roll. You need to find not only 1 Cassante, which is hard to find, you have to find 2 Cassantes. Ideally, you're upgrading one of the Cassantes, then you're finding another Cassante to help out with that. Because if you're playing this and you're playing double Nico, it is not as good, right? Like, you know, so that's usually how you fill in your board. And then obviously you can fit in Prodigy. I think this version also caps a little bit better, because the Nico gives you the synergies to play around Seraphine late game. So like I said, this one's just more high roll, probably higher cap variation. I think this variation will also be fine. I just wanted to let you guys know that this one, like now this one's worthwhile is what I'm trying to say. And in my video, I made the allusions that you should almost always go for this one. Either or is fine. This one's probably higher cap. This one's probably more consistent is what I would say. But either way, I digress. That's the Malzahar comps. Like I said, if you see double trouble, I don't know if it's like an instant click augment, but it's pretty close to an instant click augment in my eyes. Like if you see this, the only time that you shouldn't click is if you don't have a good opener for it, right? Obviously, if you have an opener where you can actually play double trouble leading up to Malzahar, or if you have good Malzahar items, that's where it's going to really shine. I gave the example in the video before, but it's something like, you know, if you start the game off and you have 2 Syndras, for example, then you're clicking double trouble and you're not just like losing every round on stage 2, you're actually making use of the augment. Like that's really important when you click it, right? Because you get offered pretty early on. You can also get offered in the middle of the game as well, but all I'm trying to say is that you want to have a duplicate copy of something before you click it. And other than that, I think that's like the only condition. Then you can just hard force towards the Malzahar because it's broken with the Rammus. Anyways, next comp. We're actually going to talk about Xayah Bastions. So this one's one that kind of slips a little bit under the radar. I usually have trouble picking the last reroll because a lot of the rerolls are really strong in different situations. I always mention things like Kale. I mentioned things like the crew, for example. Xayah Bastions is very consistent right now, and I think it's a lot better as of like the recent patches and some of the changes that happen. Basically, you just play around 6 Bastion with Xayah. You could drop Bastions and play deeper edgelords if you have items for like some of the edgelords like Volibear, or some of the Volibear like Samira, Yasuo if you're playing around that. But with this board, you typically roll for Xayah, and then you could also go for Xinjiao 3 and Shen 3. You could also roll on level 7 to go for Swain 3 if you're particularly high roll on the Xayah, and then try and fit in your board a little bit better. The board does complete itself pretty nicely on level 7, and here I just have the Jinx as a bonus unit to play. With Xayah, a lot of the reason why she's super strong is because Guinsoo got buffed and the Kraken got buffed. So her basic core of being an auto attacker AD scaling unit, it works really well with her. And it's just a lot better as of the times that they buffed the Guinsoo and the Kraken, which was like a patch or 2 ago. Basically, really strong, and it's very consistent. It also can cap very high, because if you squint hard enough and you look at the board, it kind of looks almost like those like Fast 9 boards, except you're playing Xayah instead of Twisted Fate. So if you high roll and you hit your units hard enough, and you can actually make it to some like 5 cost to cap out, like swap in a Braum, maybe play a Volibear or something, then you actually like get the best of both worlds, where you have a reroll that can keep up with a lot of the level 9 boards, because you actually have like the core of the level 9 board, except you just have some 3-star units extra, which could work really well if other people aren't capping much higher than what they're expecting to cap, if that makes sense. So you do have options for high cap, which is really nice. In terms of power-ups, I think On the Edge is really good. On the Edge is quite good for her. Just because you get a lot of damage amp, and the damage amp works really well with her kit, as well as her start running bonus. It does extra magic damage, so this works really well in that regard. Typically, because she's like an auto attacker, crit isn't the greatest on her, so damage amp works really well if you can just stack more damage amp. In terms of other augments, you can basically just go for anything. There's like double strike or stuff that gives her more attack speed that works out okay. But usually it's like a damage thing, because you're going to stall out long enough anyways. And the damage is going to help a lot more. So up to you what you can make work. There's also things like Tiny Team that can sometimes be good with this. I don't think it's that good anymore, because they nerfed a lot of the bonuses and those things. But this is like the old Tiny Team board if you played a couple patches ago, just to let you know. If you're looking at your team plan, you're like, this looks familiar. It's like a similar cadence or playstyle as what it was in the past. Anyways, those are the reroll comps. Now we're going to talk a little bit about 4-cost comps. Now when I talk about these 4-cost comps, like I say, everything is situational. Obviously, a reroll comp is very good if you hit a reroll unit and you just reroll the unit. It's very obvious when you have a reroll spot. It's like, oh look, I have a Malzahar. I guess I can play Malzahar, right? That's a very obvious thing. 4-costs are a little bit less obvious, so a lot of times what I would recommend is looking at your lobby. If a lot of your lobby is pushing levels or trying to play around 4-costs, then it makes sense to play closer to those levels, because you're going to match the cadence of everybody else. So when they're strong, you'll be strong. When they're weak, you'll be weak type of beat. But it can also be counter strategy. If a lot of your people in your lobby are playing like yahoos and they're just like trying to like get to level 9, trying to play around high cost units, which is really common in all levels of gameplay, 4-costs are a great way to punish that, because you roll all your gold on level 8, you're strong on stage 4, and some people, they'll make it to level 9, they'll outcap you, they'll get the first, but you can farm a second, or a third, or a fourth, just from being the HP leader in the lobby, and those are things that are really key. So that's why I'm mentioning the 4-costs here. But like I said, we're also going to talk about the 5-costs, which, you know, if you play some of these 4-cost boards, I don't want you guys to get upset saying like, I went second, this comp sucks. It's like, no, that's the point, right? That's the point of a lot of these 4-cost comps. They can go first in a good spot, but it could be outcapped from some of the 5-cost boards. Anyways, first board I want to talk about, Battle Academia Yuumi. This one's been around the block the entire set. So, you know, if you haven't seen it by now, you basically play 5 Battle Academia and then you try and go for 5 Prodigy. 5 Prodigy is a huge spike because it allows your units to also heal and it gives a huge amount of mana regen. Usually you're playing Yuumi. Yuumi has more front-loaded damage now after a lot of the changes from reworks from very early on in the set. So a lot of times you're just trying to make her have more burst damage. So Jewel Gauntlet, like, you know, you don't really want Archangels on her, like a Rabadon's is great. But any sort of items, really flexible items, because you don't really need to build mana gen on her, because you're playing deep into Prodigy, you're gonna have the mana gen from the trait, so you don't need to build like tier based items on her mostly. So it works really well. It gives her a lot of flexibility in how you want to build her as a caster. Gunblade also works really well with her, because if you can stall out long enough, Yuumi does scale the longer the fight goes on. She basically launches extra pages. That scaling is a lot worse from like where it was earlier in the set, but it's still something to take into account, and the Gunblade works really well in just keeping your front line alive. Your front line playing around Cassante and Leona. Leona is really hard to kill. Cassante is really hard to deal with. In your high cap, Seraphine also does an insane amount of burst damage, so if you can get some items on Seraphine, that would be great. I think Adaptive Helms also work really well, because it works with the Prodigy bonus of gaining additional mana gen from all sources, so something like this is like some really niche Giga Seraphine builds. But either way, like spell crit on her, obviously you just want her to like drop the nuke and do an insane amount of damage. In terms of fruits on this board, a lot of times for your power-ups for Yuumi, you usually go for Bullet Hell. It used to be, it was bugged, then it wasn't bugged, then it's good. This is just like a flat increase in damage, because you're firing more projectiles, and all of Yuumi's damage is basically those projectiles of the pages. So Bullet Hell works really well as just being like a raw damage increase, which makes a lot of sense and works really well with her kit. But also there's other things that can work out pretty well. There's one where it's like every time you cast you gain extra AP. I forget what it's called. That's a good option. In terms of frontline, a lot of times Tank Zilla works well with this board, just because the Leona and the Cassante, depending on who you get as your upgraded unit and who you have itemized, they both live so long that Tank Zilla usually procs on both of them, like either or. So this is a great option for your frontline. If not, other frontline power-ups are also okay with this board. Next, let's talk a little bit about Star Guardian. So Star Guardian is really strong. Basically, this Jinx just does an insane amount of damage. It can work really well in just like deleting units. Also really flexible in doing a lot of burst damage and just like one-tapping boards very easily. But basically with this board, you don't play super deep into Star Guardian unless you maybe have an emblem, then you can kind of decide to go more into it. But basically you're trying to carry around Jinx, and then you're playing Cassante and Poppy in terms of your front line. Then in terms of synergies, you're always trying to fit in some extra units to try and synergize with them. You don't have to play all the Star Guardians. You can drop some that you don't have the synergies for. But a lot of times you're going to play something along the lines of like Kabuko for heavyweight for your Poppy. Xayah bonus is good but not necessary, and then eventually a Varus. But usually, like, if you're not level 9, you can't fit in everybody. Usually you're dropping units like the Xayah, the Varus, obviously the Braum, and you're playing something like this on level 8. Either way, in terms of Jinx, you have many different builds for her. Damage amp works really well. I didn't mention it that much in this video, but Giant Slayer is just a really good item on pretty much everybody. So Giant Slayer is a great item there. And then IE. With Jinx, a lot of times you're going for a casting type of build, so Shojin can work out really well, but you also don't need Shojin. She casts fast enough with her passive of just giving a bunch of attack speed, so you can actually go for like triple damage items on her in some cases, and then she just hits like a truck. But it's up to you. I think the more consistent thing, especially if you're like, you know, more beginner or like trying to get things to work and you're not super familiar with how the units function and analyzing your board states, Shojin is going to be more consistent. It's just going to be more, it's going to be an easier thing to play around. When you're thinking about Jinx, the main thing that you want is Gather Force. Gather Force, basically on cast you get stacking attack damage equal to your mana spent. Jinx has a lot of attack speed and she casts very consistently. That's why I was talking about Shojin as being more consistent. She also has a decent mana threshold, so she actually gets a lot of AD, right? She has an 80 mana threshold, so if you take that, she's basically after 2 casts getting like about a Deathblade's worth of AD. Roughly speaking, that is. So she actually scales really hard, and if you build her with damage amp and crit, it basically makes it so when she fires a rocket, at one point after a couple casts in the fight, she's basically one-tapping everything. And it just comes down to if the Jinx can like delete everybody fast enough. And then obviously you have Poppy and Cassante. A lot of this board, the front line matters a lot, so having upgrades on all these units is going to help, because obviously your Jinx is going to be able to delete everybody pretty consistently or pretty easily. So that's just like part of how that build works together. And that's why Shojin, like I said, you don't have to have it. It's not like your best item, but it's something that can help with that consistency. Lastly, this is just one variation of many different boards that I'm going to talk about, but this is just talk about Volibear Flex. Volibear, really solid unit and just really good at just like holding melee items and doing pretty well. I usually talk about this board as an in-between step to a lot of Fast 9 boards, which we'll talk about right after this, so you can try and draw the parallels between the two of them. But basically Volibear, pretty flexible on items, does a lot of damage. A lot of times you can build them with full crit, like Hodge, IE, and then one survivability item, usually like an Edge of Night, or you can make a QSS for anti-stun or Asterix. You can also build him with other melee items. You can even build him with attack speed based items because he has a lot of attack speed. I've seen some people put Kraken on him. It's not even that bad. It's okay. So he's really flexible on items, and you can usually stabilize. But I like to have the full crit build. I think that's the one that I usually find the most consistent. And basically what you're doing is you're playing around Bastions and Edgelords. You don't have to play this deep into Bastion. You can play deeper into Edgelord. You can play deeper into Luchador. You can even play deeper into Soulfighter. You can play Volibear, Samira Flex, and you can play Volibear, Samira, 6 Soulfighter, or something like that, right? Very flexible. You can basically play Volibear with anything, and it'll usually do okay as long as you have some of Edgelord, Bastion, or Luchador activated, because it just allows him to have that extra survivability, which works well with his kit. But just a great unit, great scale on everything. You can even build it with like triple damage items because he has a pass. His active basically gives him attack speed, omnivamp, and CC immunity. So, you know, wouldn't necessarily always put like the CC stuff like Titans or QSS on him, but they can still work out pretty well because this is only when he casts, and then like start a fight effects might be a little bit different. Either way, usually damage like this, and then a survivability is all right. Like I said, there's many different ways you can build around the Volibear. This is one where I'm playing like Samira with some edgelords and 6 Bastion as a level 9 cap, which works really well with the Braum. But you can also drop this. I've also shown variations where you're playing Jinx, and you can play like Jinx with Gnar, you know, until you have a Braum, and you can have a synergy like this that works really nice, because the edgelord Bastion Shen kind of ties the board together really nicely. Many different options, many different variations. But whenever you're playing around Volibear, one thing I will say is that Serious Slam to me is very important if you're trying to carry this unit like permanently, basically. I've played him without Serious Slam, I played him with Serious Slam, and it makes such a huge difference. Basically, he does like a huge burst of damage and stuns every time he switches to a new target. It might not seem like a lot because it's like, you know, based off of base physical damage, he just does like 1 hit, so it doesn't seem like it's crazy, but the stun is massive. This paired with the stun, he just like jumps around and just like goes infinite. It's really, to me, it's really important to have this on the Volibear. But anyways, like I said, this board is usually what I consider to be like an in-between board to a lot of level 9 boards. That's where we're going to take this last little part of the video. So if you haven't been keeping up with the set, maybe you're returning to it after a while, trying to get those last ranks before the set ends, maybe trying to experience what the set has to offer because maybe you skipped out on some patches you didn't really like. I know there's a lot of people that return right towards the end of the set. One of the main things with this set is capping with 5 costs. Right? 5 costs have come to a point where pretty much all of them are extremely strong and extremely potent. There's units like Lee Sin that just do insane burst damage, Seraphine does insane damage, and Twisted Fate works really well on a lot of boards because of his fruits as well as his scaling aspect that can basically just guarantee you a win if you hit him early enough. Because of that, Fast 9 has been really popular, and when I say Fast 9, a lot of it is because you want to hit a Twisted Fate early in order to get that scaling aspect. Now, I did mention a lot of 4 cost comps. You can't just easily Fast 9 anymore. A couple patches ago, there were basically no playable comps except for Fast 9. I exaggerate a little bit, but you know what I mean. If you played it like, you know, 1 or 2 patches ago, it was like, if you played Fast 9 or nothing, so the whole lobby was just playing like a degenerate, everybody was just sacking their life trying to go level 9. It's a little bit different now. A lot of people are going to roll for some of these boards, so it's going to be harder for you to make it to level 9. So, you know, it's hard to say. The problem is that if somebody is able to make it to 9, these 5 costs are usually going to outcap most of the 4 cost boards, right? A lot of these 4 cost boards, they really rely on you eventually hitting some of the 5 costs to even have a reliable top 4, in my opinion, right? But if you obviously skip the step of playing around the 4 costs and just roll your goal on level 9, you can cap with extremely high powerful boards. One example is Bastions. Usually the 2 level 9 boards that you would think of is Bastions or Juggernauts. With Bastions, you're usually playing 6 Bastion, and then your backline, you're playing Twisted Fate, Seraphine, and Xayah. Xayah, you care about the least in this comp. Xayah is just a casting bot. You usually just put mana gen on her. You could put her with carry items, but it's not super important. You're mostly just playing her for her extra ability of giving your whole team attack speed. Like, she buffs your whole board, and then you get the extra dude here. But typically you're playing Seraphine and Twisted Fate as the dual carries. Twisted Fate works well at just doing like AoE to the whole board. Seraphine drops a nuke, right? She basically drops this huge burst of damage. She scales well with the extra Bastions as well, which works really nicely for her kit. But basically she's just going to drop a giant bomb and she's going to kill everybody. So when you're playing Seraphine, you really care about having like a crit. Usually you can build her with like the meme build as well. You know, like if you guys watch like TikToks, everybody's always like, oh, you know what Seraphine Biss is? It's like Warmogs and Crown Guard, you know what I mean? Right? Like, you know, you can do this, right? Seraphine scales with all of her stats. So she can turn a lot of these items into a lot of damage. That's why these items are typically considered to be really broken on her. But if you're building her in a more traditional sense, mana gen, make sure you get her cast off. Crit, make sure her spell crits. Last item, pretty flexible. Twisted Fate, mostly attack speed items. I just put an attack speed build here, but you can basically put anything on him. But he scales really well with attack speed. He does both AP and AD. So you basically have 2 units that are really flexible in their items, and then a bunch of frontline. When you're playing around the 6 Bastion board, the main thing that you want, obviously, is Noxious. Excuse me, I can't type. Noxious Trap on Twisted Fate. This gives you your Burn, Wound, Shred, Sunder, so you don't have to worry about utility items. That makes you focus on making pure damage items on everybody. Then on Seraphine, this one's going to take me a second to find, because I can't control F it. You want Mage, right? With Mage, Seraphine casts twice. Seraphine takes a while to cast. That's her big downside. So with Mage, you basically turn this into a lottery. She can snipe the backline, So if she just drops 2 bombs, if one of those bombs hits the enemy carry, you basically win the fight. Even if you don't hit the enemy carry, Twisted Fate sometimes can clutch up, but it's just insane. The amount of burst damage she does with just 2 bomb drops on the field, it's unlike anything else. You need mage on her. So a lot of times you're saving your fruits with this comp, making sure you try and hit mage and noxious in order for your items and your build to make sense here. The Juggernaut variation is similar. Except instead of playing around a Seraphine, you're instead playing around Lee Sin. So a lot of times, if you have more melee focused items, you can play the Juggernaut variation. AP and AD mixed, or AP and attack speed mixed, you would play more towards Bastions. But either way, you can always play, like whenever you're fast 9ing, it's usually based on whatever you have in your opener. So if you have more Juggernauts, Juggernaut variation. You have more Bastions, Bastion variation. But same thing, Twisted Fate the same way, Zyra the same way, except now we're playing Lee Sin. Lee Sin, you give him like the IE and the Hodge. Lee Sin fruits are pretty good. Like, there's a lot of different options for him. You don't have to, you can build him more drain tanky as well, because he's going to benefit from 6 Juggernauts, so he's going to be really hard to kill. So a lot of times you'll see something like IE, like Bloodthirster Sterex. I usually like to put Hodge on him, and then 1 survivability item, so I usually like something like this, just to make the crits more consistent. But you have lots of different options. With Lee Sin, in terms of power-ups, there's lots of different ones that work really well. Anything that scales his AD really nicely, it really depends on your build. So like, for example, he gets Gather Force as well. Gather Force is becoming a little bit more popular on him, right? Especially if you have a Hodge build, because you just gain so much AD through staying alive for a majority of the fight that eventually you're just one-tapping units towards the end. You can also take something like On the Edge, right? This starts with less HP, but then it gives you damage amp. So a lot of times you're looking at like how to fill in your Lee Sin items in the most meaningful way, or how to fill in his damage in the most meaningful way. There's also ones that give Omnivam, right? Unflinching. Where's the last one? Final Boss as well, where you get stacking damage amp. You can't get Not Done Yet. I thought there was one more, but either way, you have a variety of options. A lot of it comes down to your build, but usually you're going for one of the more damaged ones. You really want something that's either going to give him a bunch of AD or a bunch of damage. A bunch of AD or a bunch of damage amp, and that way if you build him with an IE, he's just going to be one-tapping units. That's what you care about most, right? A lot of the other ones that are more like survivability based are probably a lot worse in my opinion, so it's a little bit whatever. Last comp that I'm going to talk about, this isn't a level 9 comp, but it's also another risky comp. This is the level 8 Ashe board. I made a video on this one as well, so I'm just gonna amend this. Like, I'm just throwing it in here. It got nerfed, so this board is just a lot more risky to play. But basically, you're just trying to roll on level 8 for Ashe, and then you're trying to get repeated 5 Crystal Gambit cash outs in order to cap really high. Eventually, you can drop out of 5 Crystal Gambit, but the idea is that you get these rewards on kills. So usually you build your Ashe with like double Kraken and a Guinsoo, and then you just try and cap out really high with legendaries. And eventually, if you get Ornn artifacts or emblems, right, you can get strategist emblems from Crystal Gambit cash outs. At one point, you're going to get enough resources that you can outcap any board. However, it's very risky because if you don't get to that point, this comp is very easy to go 8th. Like, these units are not strong enough on their own, so it's basically more considered to be like a coin flip of rolling on 8 to see if you hit Ashe 2 and you hit like one of these guys 2-starred. And then if you hit that on level 8, you're usually going to win a lot of rounds on stage 4 and then be in a good spot. This board had a lot of success because when people are trying to go level 9, a lot of times they were playing weak boards on stage 4. So when you would roll for Ashe, everybody else would be sitting there with just not playing a board. So you would win a lot of rounds for free, which is what made this board a lot more reliable and a lot more consistent. But like I said, it did get nerfed. So, you know, be careful with it. If you want to know more about the comp, I'm not going to go into it too much here because I think it's way too risky, especially on the current patch, unless you really need to get a first, right? Which I don't think is really like climbing ladder type of beat for anybody here. There is a video on my channel, Is Ashe Broken? You can check it out, and I go into much more detail about the comp and like a lot of different variations and the fruits and all of that. But anyways, hopefully that was helpful. We'll see if there's a B patch. I tried to kind of get out everything here for you guys and try and summarize it. A lot of the comps are very similar to last patch. There wasn't that much of an update from last patch to this patch. The main thing is just thematically, if a lot more people in your lobbies are rolling earlier, you want to roll to match that. So for example, if I'm in a lobby and most of my lobby is playing fast 8 boards or playing on level 8, and I'm sitting there greeting to go 9, there's no guarantee that by the time I make it to 9, I won't be dead because everybody's way stronger than me on stage 4. Those are the type of cadences that matter in a lot of fights, and in a lot of, like, you know, maybe it doesn't matter as much if you're a beginner player because like having a game plan might matter more there, but as you climb up or as you try and get your high ranks towards the end of the set, these are the type of skill sets that are going to be really important. So you really want to pay attention to what your lobby is doing, right? Make sure that the spot for the comp that you're playing is really good, and if you have to roll for level 8 or if you have to commit to a reroll, it might not be the highest cap. You might not win the game because there's going to be people make it to level 9. Heck, you might even get a bot 4 placement because too many people were able to cap higher than you, but that's like the main thing, that's the main flavor that can change the way the comps are perceived, is what I want to say, right? Like, I can be playing in a lobby and everybody's going level 9, then it feels like a huge mistake to play a 4 cost comp, or sorry, to play a level 8 comp around 4 cost, because I won't cap as high. I'm just going to burn my gold, and then everybody greeds and everybody hits the high cost units, and then they just win out with Lee Sins and Twisted Fates and Seraphines and all of that bullshit. Meanwhile, if everybody's rolling on level 8 and I try and play a high cap comp like Twisted Fate, I might get to Twisted Fate, I roll down, I don't hit Twisted Fate 2, I'm only 1 life because I lost every round because everybody else rolled their gold, and then I just lose the game anyways. So try and figure out like what your lobby is doing, and then try and match that with either, if they're predominantly reroll, play reroll; if they're predominantly level 8, play level 8; predominantly 5 cost, play 5 cost. And then if you have the counter meta strategy, or if you have a good read, like, oh, there's a couple people going level 9, I can roll really hard here on level 8 because then they'll kill each other off, save my HP. Those things matter a little bit more, I think, on this patch, which makes it a little bit more fun in my opinion. But obviously, you know, set 15, if you like it, you like it; if you don't, you don't. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and see ya, bye bye.